Welcome to Adulting with Joyce Pring. Watch the full video of this episode on my channel, www.youtube.com/JoycePringTV. And if you want to level up your adulting game, check out joycepring.com/collections for my digital products and courses. I feel like in the culture today, yan ang number one conversation. Identity, self-worth, self-love, self-care. It's all about the autonomy of the self, right? And how you identify yourself is who you are. It's what you are. It's everything that's about you. But what does the Bible say about our identity?
And I think, sobrang lalim niya no? Kasi I think in a philosophical way, yun talaga yung essence nung parang sino ka. It's really who you are and ano yung what's your purpose. I think sa apologetics, alam mo yung mga questions na yun, na who you are, what's your purpose, why are you here, diba? Saan ka papunta? And wag na tayo lumayo. Let's start with Genesis, diba? It's really in Genesis 1 and 2 na doon natin makikita kung sino ba talaga tayo. Because I think Genesis 1:26 to 28, where God said, let us create man in our image, in our own likeness. And sinabi niya doon na, di ba, God created us in His own image, in His likeness. And then after that, multiply and subdue the earth. I think that's a very important passage when it comes to identify, parang paano mo malalaman kung sino ka. Kasi it talks about man's ontology or essence first. Second, it talks about your relationships. It talks about your function. Na una-una, we are created being. Hindi tayo like vacuum lang na boom,
You
andyan
came
ka na.
into existence
No,
lang.
so ibig sabihin, hindi tayo, yun nga, created tayo, merong gumawa. So nag-exist tayo, buhay tayo, dahil may God na nag-create sa atin at nagsusustain sa atin. Pangalawa, dahil may God, siya si God, ibig sabihin, creation lang tayo, creature lang tayo, diba? So it means na under tayo, ang layo ng being, God siya, tao lang tayo. So we will be forever under the authority of God. Pangatlo, malalaman din natin dun na dahil under tayo kay God, yung will natin, kung paano ba yung dapat natin ginagawa, should be under God's will. Hindi natin pwedeng gawin yung mga gusto lang natin gawin just because. If someone who created you, siya yung nakakaalam kung ba't kanya kinreate. And fourth is, alam mo rin yung purpose mo. Malalaman mo because of that verse, di ba? Isa sa purpose na ginawa is for you to multiply and subdue the earth. Di ba? So meron na how you will relate to one another, to God. And lastly is really to glorify God. Ang daming passages, dahil, di ba, parang create tayo for His glory. And there are passages na in Isaiah 41 na yung tinawag niya is create niya for His glory. So, by just looking at Genesis 1 and 2, doon natin makita. Ang haba yata ng sagot ko. But it's really...
it's very helpful,
It's really that. I think yun, huwag na tayo lumayo. Umpisa ng Bible, 1 and 2. You will really see who you are. Sino ka as a tao, ano yung purpose mo, bakit ka nasa mundo, I think. Yeah.
Mahaba siya, pero may point. And I was just thinking back to the time that I actually studied abroad to dive into philosophy. And the first question that our professor asked us was, how do you know that you're not a brain in a vat? Sorry, what? I couldn't understand the question. Like, how do you know that this is not just a simulation and you're just a brain in a vat and scientists are just poking the brain and telling them that, hey Joyce, you're having a conversation with Dia because you're a podcaster in the Philippines, you have a family. How do you know this is all just not a simulation? And that really, instead of pulling me away from Christianity as I thought it would, it pulled me back to Genesis. You're right. Because if God did not say in His word that I created you in my image for this purpose, for my glory, then everything just as well be a simulation and so senseless. Because I always ask myself, like, okay, every time I reached a certain goal or a career milestone or I had a healthy relationship, so what? Like, I could literally die the next second, from a heart attack or something. And everything would be in vain. Like, there's no point to anything at all. So, I guess now that we've seen what the Bible says about our identity, how should it then affect the way that we identify and the way that we carry ourselves in the world?
I think it's dahil, di ba, once you know your purpose, paano ka create, it should always parang lalabas at lalabas siya sa paano mo siya i-live out eh. Di ba? So that's how it will affect your understanding your identity. The more that you understand your identity, the more na yung purpose mo, yung assurance mo, it will follow it. So it's really a big impact, I think, yung understanding ng identity. Yung paano tayo ginawa. Right?
Paano naman ngayon in this culture where I guess self-identifying ang culture natin no? Na parang we make our own definitions and we make our own identities. It used to be that, okay, you have these specific identities that people fall in under, but ngayon, it's create as you go. Whatever you feel, that's your identity. I want to ask you, first, saan ba nag-umpisa yon? And pangalawa, what are the pitfalls of that kind of thinking and outlook of the world?
Lalim na. Pero hindi, like,
in
I'm
layman's
not sure,
term, teacher.
Hindi, I'm not sure if you're familiar in the term na solipsism. It's
No.
about self. So, parang dati pa yun. So, ever since, meron ng ganong kind of thinking ang mga tao na it's all about self. Kung ano yung nararamdaman
therefore I
ko.
am.
Oo, diba? So, kung ano yung nararamdaman ko, authority ko, ako. So, ano yung gusto kong, kung sino ako ngayon, yun ako. So, it's something na, and alam natin na kapag lahat tayo may kanya-kanya, ang gulo. Diba? It will be, the more na confusion, parang yung confusion mas bibigat. Kasi, lost ka eh. Ano tama? Ano yung truth? At babalik ka dun eh, na ano yung absolute truth kung sino ako. Kasi if gagawin nating authority natin ng bawat isa, magulo siya. Diba?
I love the saying na in some cultures, they love their neighbors and others, they eat their neighbors. So, parang you can't just say na everything is subjective to whatever you feel or want.
Yeah. And somehow, yun yung medyo delikado sa culture ngayon. Kasi everything's just, some people will say it's just social construct, diba? Kung paano lang ginagawa. And pagka ganun, lost tayo. Kasi wala kang, yun nga, again, but it will go back to the absolute truth, right?
That's it for this episode of Adulting with Joyce Pring. If you liked this podcast, please don't forget to use the hashtag Adulting with Joyce Pring and also check out www.joycepring.com for the show notes and tag me on social media with you know it at Joyce Pring. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Paalam!